Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Lecture 4 of English 100B. Again, as we did the last time, we'll start out with some reminders. By now, you should have watched telecast 1, 2, and 3 for lessons 1 to 3. And you should all be in the process of adding on to a grammar review cassette tape. Remember, when you make the tape, that's step 1, but you need to listen to it at least one time a day. And you should be working with the online grammar tutorial to supplement any class presentation on any point in grammar that you'd like some extra practice on. All of the exercises on that site have self-correct answers, and the website URL is grammar.deanzacollege.org. Please be sure that you are subscribed to the class listserv, because instructions for doing that are in your course syllabus, and listserv memos are the way you get due dates on current assignments. On today's topic, we're really doing two basic things, but we're also closing the door on the simple sentence because we'll say everything we have to say about that today. We'll check your answers to exercise 3 and 4. We'll start with exercise 3. Pages 47 to 54 in the Palette book, where I asked you to locate subjects in simple sentences, and then we'll move on to exercise 4 in the same book, pages 55 to 68, where you're locating subjects and verbs in simple sentences. As a reminder, in exercise 2 and 3 and 4 in setting up the Palette, italics are used to indicate the title of a book. Girl with a Pearl Earring would be italicized, and the title of a painting, such as Woman with a Pearl Necklace, would also be in italics. I'd like to offer you some reading suggestions because you may hopefully start to get interested in reading more about Vermeer in terms of the novels that he wrote. These are the 4 that we're working from. We haven't gotten to John Bailey yet, but we will. John Bailey is the husband of Iris Murdoch. If you saw the movie Iris, this is her husband. He was a retired professor from Oxford University. It's kind of an intriguing mystery novel, The Red Hat, based on an actual Vermeer painting and the exhibition that was held in The Hague in 1995. Tracy Chevalier we're working through right now, Girl with the Pearl Earring. And she's a very interesting writer. I don't know, I couldn't put it down. When I read it, I went straight through. Susan Vreeland is an interesting writer, and we're going to come up against her next, I believe, when we move on to the complex sentence. And her book is Girl in Hyacinth Blue. I'll tell you a little bit about her book in just a second. It's a very unusual one. Finally, Catherine Weber, her music lesson is based on a painting, certainly, that Vermeer could have done, but she chose not to do an actual painting that is in the collection, the Royal Collection of the Queen of England. In Girl in Hyacinth Blue, we're going to be looking at that next, just to mention it in case you decide you'd like to read it before we get to that particular title. She starts in the present, in 2001, 2002, and she gives you a little story about a man who has a Vermeer painting, a genuine Vermeer painting, that he wants authenticated by a friend, and as soon as the friend authenticates it, he's ready to burn it in the fireplace, which is very strange because this, of course, would be a priceless painting if it turned out to be a real one. And in the next chapter, you go back a certain number of years to who had the painting before that professor owned it. And then you go back another generation. Well, who had it before that? And who had it before that? So that book reads like an onion. You know, when you have an onion and you peel off a layer and there's another layer underneath it and underneath it and underneath it, and it's not till the last 2 layers that you get to who modeled for the painting, which we think is Vermeer's daughter, and the very last painting, which talks about Vermeer. One of them talks about Vermeer, and I think maybe the last one talks about the model. But the way she set up that novel is very intriguing, so there's some good suggestions for you to fill in your time with and expand your knowledge. So now we'll start with exercise 3 on pages 47 to 54, and I'll review the directions for you. This was an exercise where you were to locate subjects in simple sentences. So in each of the examples that you had, the verb of the main clause is already underlined twice, and you're asked to put 1 line under the subject. And then the important part, writing the subject word or words that you find in the blank space to the right. And the reason that writing out the subject words becomes so important is that it's an automatic way of reinforcing your awareness of what a subject is and how it functions in a sentence. So you remember that we looked at the example the other day, and this was it on page 47. It said, in a very short amount of time, Greet's life becomes more complicated and we found out that, well, actually, remind me, what is the subject, Jeff, on this one, on the example? We went through it the other day.
Life.
Life. And so you would have marked this a main clause, hopefully, a simple sentence, and you would have written out life as your subject. And then we spent some time on this first example. Without any warning, there is an announcement of a quarantine in the part of Delft inhabited by Greet's family, preventing anyone from visiting the plague-infested part of the town for more than 10 days. We said is was the verb, and the subject, Scott, turned out to be what?
Announcement.
Announcement. And we said it was what kind of a clause?
A main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
A simple sentence.
And announcement then is the subject. And the other thing that we did was we looked up the word quarantine, we looked up the word plague, we looked up the word infested, because we said that part of the project here was to look up any words you're unfamiliar with, because that's the intelligent way to expand your vocabulary. Remind me, Farah, a plague is what? You should have it written down right in your book. This should not be a difficult question to answer. Ben, what's a plague?
Sickness takes over the world.
So a cold. Is a cold a plague?
Sort of, a little.
No, I don't think so. Not in the real world. What is it, Elbelin? What's a plague?
A deadly disease?
A deadly disease. Is it catchy?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the problem. Because if you have something, remember we mentioned the bubonic plague the other day that was infesting Europe, and people were bitten by rats and they died. So if you had the bubonic plague and you were near somebody who didn't have it, chances are very good that person would have caught it too and also died. What did we say a quarantine was? Jerry, what's a quarantine?
To not allow people to exit or leave an area, enter or leave an area,
Why would you do that?
to keep anything from being contaminated or spread.
Right, to keep that disease from being spread. And infested means what, Maritza?
So widespread disease.
Right, through that whole area, people dropping like flies. And one of the problems was that in this particular infestation, Greet's younger sister, Agnes, who was only 10 years old, had been exposed to the plague and she couldn't go to visit. On sentence number 2, just a reminder, this is as far as we got the other day, Greet's Sunday visit to see her family are brought to an abrupt halt. Amy, if are brought is the verb, your subject is what?
Visit?
Visits, a whole lot louder. What kind of a clause are we looking at?
Simple?
Well, not a simple clause, a main clause. And what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple
A
sentence.
simple sentence. So again, you would write out the word visits, and that's as far as we got. Before we go further, anybody with a question? One thing you can expect from me is anytime I see a $5 or a $10 word that we may not have discussed that I think might be a problem, I will ask you what it means. Okay? Take a look at this one with me, Kim. At the end of that period of time, Greet is told of the death of her 10-year-old sister Agnes. So if is told is the verb, Kim, where's the subject?
Greet?
Greet. And what kind of a clause is it?
Main?
And what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple?
So we would write in Greet. Good. At the same time, Greet is drawn closer to the world of painting embraced by Master Vermeer. Vince, if is drawn is the verb, where's the subject?
Greet.
It's Greet again. What kind of a clause are we looking at?
Main clause.
It's a main clause. What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
It's a simple sentence, and once again, you would take the time to write out the subject, which is Greet. On this next one, she is allowed to look at the setting for the painting of Van Riegewen's wife by placing her master's robe over her head and peering into the lens of the camera obscura. So is allowed to look is the verb. Pippa, where's the subject?
She.
What kind of a clause is it?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Now this is the easy part of this job. She is the subject, as you said. And at the moment, I just want to deal with words. What in the world is a camera obscura?
One moment.
Go ahead, go to the back of the book and read it to us. Of course, first of all, people, if you didn't happen to know that definition, look it up, and we will write a definition of what it is. I'm going to make this just a touch smaller, just
Okay.
a little bit smaller.
I have it.
Okay,
A darkened enclosure having an aperture usually provided with a lens through which light from external objects enters to form an image of the objects on the opposite surface.
One more time, because I want to have a short definition from you.
A darkened enclosure having an aperture usually provided with a lens through which light from external objects enters to form an image of the objects on the opposite surface.
What are you going to write down?
Well, basically, it flips it upside down.
It does flip it upside down, but you didn't get it from that definition.
Okay.
What are you going to write from that definition?
A darkened aperture with a lens.
You're going to write the whole thing down.
Yeah.
Can anybody get a shorter definition? What would you say, Jerry?
An enclosed box with a lens in it?
That's true. Do you look through a big aperture, do you suppose?
No, with a small.
So it's really the equivalent of a pinhole camera. The camera had not been invented at that time, at least people didn't have one. It comes out much later in the 1800s. But this was a kind of a device where you looked through a very small aperture, and Pip is right. You look through it and it turns the image upside down. Here's an image of actually the kind of a camera obscura that probably Vermeer was using, because look at the date, it's 1685. He didn't own one. It was a very expensive piece of equipment, but if he looked through it with a robe over his head, that all he could see was the part of the room that he was painting, and that would be in very sharp focus. And actually, painters even today, quite often to check their composition, turn a painting upside down. You can tell better how it works when it's upside down. That sounds crazy, I know, but professional artists often turn it, and the camera did it for you. It turned it upside down. I was reading over the weekend, just glancing at a book by David Hockney, who's a major British artist, and he's just written a book where he's picked his favorite masterpieces, and he's analyzed what the artist did to create that particular image. And the one he chose from Vermeer to write about is one we haven't looked at yet, called The Milkmaid. But he's talking about the fact that there's a basket. We'll remember it when we look at it closer at a later point. The basket in front of the milkmaid is almost out of focus, as it might be in a camera. She's in very sharp focus. So is the basket behind her head. And the kind of halos that are coming off of the images that he painted are those he could only have done had he had access to some kind of photographic equipment. And the precursor to the camera was the camera obscura. The Getty Museum has one in Los Angeles. If you're down there, you can check it out sometime. Let's look at sentence number 6. It is a tool to enable the painter to see the scene being painted with greater clarity. Janice, if the verb is, the subject is obviously
It.
it. And the kind of clause is
Main clause.
main clause. And the kind of sentence is,
Simple.
and so we just write out the subject word it, and we go a little bit further. In sentence number 7, according to Vermeer, the camera obscura helps me to see in a different way. Jessica, if the verb is helps, what is the subject?
Camera obscura.
Right, and it only needs one quote. Camera obscura, and what kind of a clause is that?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
So you would write down that whole thing. Camera obscura. This is a C. Okay. After the completion of the painting, the powder brush, a black pewter pot, the letter, and the blue cloth drapery are removed from the table and put away in the storeroom. So we have two verbs here, are removed and put. And what would you say, Yvonne, is the subject?
Powder brush.
That's
pot,
one.
Letter, drapery.
Whoa. Where's the next one?
Pot,
Pot,
letter,
letter,
drapery.
drapery. So we would have what kind of a clause here?
Main clause,
And what kind of a sentence?
simple sentence.
So again, if you take a moment to write down, and I would do it, those individual subjects, pot, letter, and drapery, you can see that what we have here is 1, 2, 3, 4 subjects and 1, 2 verbs. We talked about that. You can have more than one subject and more than one verb in a single clause. I wonder what pewter is, Yvonne. Circle it and look it up. Again, the thing about expanding your vocabulary, you don't know whether you're ever going to see the word pewter again, and you don't question it. If it's a word you don't know, you look it up. What is it?
Any of various alloys having tin as the chief component, especially a dull alloy with lead formerly used for domestic utensils.
So what would you say? Pewter is what? Two metals. What would you say they were?
Various alloyed with lead.
No, read it again. That's one of them, but there's another one in there. Read it again.
Any of various alloys having tin as the chief component, especially a dull alloy with lead formerly used for domestic utensils.
So what would you write?
Various alloys having tin
And?
and lead.
Yes, imagine that. Okay, that's the start of that definition. Let's just see where we want to put it right now. I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to say tin and lead for what? What were they used for?
Domestic utensils.
Domestic utensils. Now you winced when we hit that word lead. I wonder why.
Did you think bad things concerning lead?
You bet.
Yeah, so that's
What
why-
happens? Lead poisoning? You know, not
Yes.
too long ago, lead was in the paint that was used in baby cribs or something like that. In fact, there's lead in some of the colors that artists paint with,
Yeah.
and they've discovered over the years that that's very toxic and can result in some serious problems. But 30, 40 years ago, they didn't think about that kind of thing. Prior to the paintings being taken away and brought to its new home, the Van Riejwens come to give their final approval for the work of art and are served wine by Griet. Elbelin, if your verbs here are come to give and are served, where's your subject?
Van Riejwens,
And what kind of a clause do you have?
main,
What kind of a sentence do you have?
simple.
So I agree with you. The subject is this husband and wife, the Van Riejwens. Good. Anybody with a question so far? This will give you an example of how slow Vermeer painted. Woman with a pearl necklace took 5 months to complete. Farah, if the verb is took, the subject is what?
Woman with a pearl necklace.
The entire title of that painting, and what kind of a clause does it give you?
Main clause.
A main clause, and what kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
So even though it's long, take the time and write it out. By the way, in passing, you notice that woman and pearl and necklace are capitalized, and that preposition, we're just on the edge of getting into prepositions, is not capitalized, and neither is the article a. Okay,
Why is that in italics, woman with a pearl necklace?
that's a convention to put the title of a painting in italics. You put the title of a book in italics. You put the title of a movie in italics. Okay? Scott, take a look at this one. There is now a feeling of sadness in the empty studio. If is the verb, remember, this points to a possible inversion. Where's your subject?
Feeling?
Feeling. So is your verb, feeling is the subject. What kind of a clause is it?
A main clause?
What kind of a sentence is it?
A simple sentence.
And so you would write down feeling. Stay on that sentence for a second. There is now a feeling of sadness in the empty studio. Hopefully you all got that right. But what I want to know, Jerry, anytime you have an inverted clause, you ought to be able to take that clause and flip it around to normal word order. Can you do that for me? Read it to me in normal word order.
Oh, boy. Feeling
You started in the right spot. I agree. A feeling. Keep
a
going.
feeling of sadness is now in the empty studio.
Okay, I would take that. Or a feeling of sadness in the empty studio is now there. Either way, we're both right. Remember that all inverted clauses can be flipped around to normal word order. Let's try another one. Standing on top of the empty table, Griet brings sunshine and pure light flooding into the studio by washing the window panes of the shuttered window with hot water and clean soapy rags. She couldn't do that when he was painting, because if she had, she would have altered the quality of light in the room. She didn't dare touch the windows. So if brings, Justin, is the verb, where is the subject?
Greet.
Greet. What kind of a clause is it?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
So again, we would write out the word greet. You remember we were talking the other day about the fact that she was allowed into the studio was because she was so good at being able to pick up the edge of a letter, the fold of a cloth, not move it, and get it in exactly the position he had it in. And that would be over a period of, as you can see in Woman with the Pearl Necklace, 5 months' time. But she wasn't allowed to clean those window panes, no matter what happened, because the clean window panes would let more light into the studio than if he had dirty ones or whatever they were when he started. Let's take a look at the next photograph. This is the proposed site for the movie about Vermeer. It's in Delft, and it's going to be based on Tracy Chevalier's novel, Girl with a Pearl Earring. It's been cast for a couple of years now. This is the kind of a house that Vermeer would have lived in. On the lowest level, that would have been the ground floor level that you would have walked in. That would have the kitchen, and it would have the room, some bedrooms perhaps, and it would have a dining area. There would be a cellar below it where food was stored, where sometimes a maid would sleep. Remember that Greet slept in the cellar of the house with that painting that Vermeer had done of the crucifixion, and that was something evidently that Protestants didn't go along with, that kind of a painting. Up on a higher level on the next floor, where you see those 3 windows, those are the kind of shuttered window panes that we're talking about, and that's where Vermeer would have painted. It's also where his mother-in-law, Maria Thin, would have lived, and way up on the top would have been the attic, where they would have gone, in this case, Greet and the master. We're not ready for that image yet. Greet and the master to mix paints. We will get to that in a minute. The star who's going to portray Vermeer is Ralph Fiennes. And the other day, Jerry, didn't you tell me you said, who's he? Was it you who said, who's he?
I don't believe so.
Do you know who Ralph Fiennes is?
Not a clue.
Oh, anybody know who Ralph Fiennes is?
I know who Ray Fiennes is.
Of course.
Yes.
And he's out in a very new movie. I'm not sure it's one I would suggest that you go to see, but he's in the new Hannibal movie.
Red Dragon.
Red Dragon, right. So on number 13, the master walks in and orders her to stop. Remember, she's cleaning these windows. To stop her activity, freezing her in her tracks. Jeff, if walks and orders are the verbs, where's the subject?
Master.
Master. What kind of a clause is it?
A main clause.
And what kind of a sentence is it?
A simple sentence.
So again, you would write out master. Now here's the question. Farah, do you see this? Freezing her in her tracks. I wonder what that means. Any idea? Okay, here's the problem with English. It's not just English, it's all languages, but we use something called figures of speech or idioms. If you grow up in this country, you probably know what freezing her in her tracks would mean. If you don't, and you come across something like this that you may not be able to look up in the dictionary as readily as you can say the word quarantine, hand goes up. What does that mean? Freezing her in her tracks. Amy, what does that mean, freezing her in her tracks?
Stopping her.
Absolutely. Make a note. Freezing her in her tracks means it makes her stop. Making her stop. Again, if you grew up in this country, you probably know that. But if you don't, you see something like this that makes no sense, I definitely want your hand up asking a question. We haven't really started the rainy season, but that, I imagine, could happen any day. And if it did, and if it were a downpour, and we walked out of the studio, and Jerry looked up at the sky, he could say, my gosh, it's raining cats and dogs. Farah, do you know what that means?
Raining heavily.
Exactly, raining heavily. But if you didn't, up goes your hand. What does that mean? Okay, always people ask a question. Any questions so far building up over anything? Scott.
Is there such a thing as a dictionary of
I'm
idioms?
sure. But since you raised that question between now and the next lecture, would you go into the library, find out where the reference section is, and take a look? I'm sure
Okay.
there's a dictionary.
It's called the
of idioms.
Longman's Idiom Dictionary.
Is that right?
Yes, because I ordered them, so.
Okay. See if we have a copy in the library.
Okay.
All libraries should contain a copy of odd and unusual dictionaries, such as if somebody told you hang left, what does that mean, Farah? Let's say you wanted to go to the bookstore and you asked me, well, how would I find the bookstore? And supposing I said to you, hang left, what would that mean? See, where would you find that, Jerry? What kind of a dictionary do you suppose?
A slang term?
The Dictionary of American Slang. Is there such a dictionary? You bet.
I'm sure there
Oh,
is.
there absolutely. Libraries have them. So now let's take a look at this. Look over your shoulder at me. This is Vermeer talking. Maritza, if the verb is look, where is your subject?
You?
And who's he talking to? This is Vermeer speaking. Look over your shoulder at me.
To greet.
Great, exactly. And what kind of a clause is this?
Main clause.
It's a main clause. What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple
It's
sentence.
a simple sentence, and it's a simple sentence that happens to be a command. Good. Number 15, her master's long and thoughtful gaze will usher in the start of a new work of art. So, will usher, Kim, is the verb. Where is the subject?
Gaze.
Gaze. What kind of a clause?
Main.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
And what does gaze mean?
To stare at.
Right. His long and thoughtful stare or look. I would agree with you on that. At home on a Sunday visit, Greet tries to describe the new painting of the baker's daughter to her blind father. You remember that poor father was blinded by that explosion of a kiln in the pottery factory, and his eyes were sewn shut. Jessica, if the verb is tries to describe, where's the subject?
Greet.
Greet. What kind of a clause is it?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
So she's only got words to work with. In the painting called Young Woman with a Jug, the model holds a pitcher of water and is about to pour its contents out of the window and onto the ground. Vince, if the verb is holds and is, where's the subject?
Model,
Model. What kind of a clause is it?
main,
What kind of a sentence is it?
simple.
Okay. Now let's take a look at that painting that we're talking about. She's trying to describe this one by Vermeer to her father, and remember that the father can't see. This is painted in 1664-65. Supposedly it's the baker's daughter. Now you remember all about the baker. He's the man who was owed money for 8,000 loaves of bread over a 3-year period of time. So he had one painting by Vermeer at the time of his death, and I think he got 2 more at that time. Now this is the studio. There's that shuttered window that the baker's daughter would be looking through, and all of those objects on the table in front of her cannot be moved until the painting is complete. Nobody goes in the studio without Vermeer's permission. Now, the whiteness, let's take a look at this next example, of the pointed cap worn by the model is of particular interest to Greet. Scott, if is the verb, your subject is,
Whiteness.
and what kind of a clause is that?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
So we would write out whiteness. Now, the thing that fascinates Greet is this. It gives the impression of being a white cap, but is actually painted with a combination of blue, violet, and yellow brush strokes. In other words, there's no dead white in it, right? Look at the content again. It gives the impression of being a white cap, but is actually painted with a combination of blue, violet, and yellow brush strokes. So if gives, is, and painted elbow lin are the verbs, the subject is?
Impression.
No, actually not. I want to put a check above that, and I have another question to ask you. Word order in English, you're looking at a clause. Do you expect to see the subject in the beginning, the middle, or the end of that clause?
Beginning.
So the subject would be?
It.
We'll come back to impression in a minute. What kind of a clause is that?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
And the subject, of course, is it. What part of speech would the impression be? Let's back up. I ate an apple. I is what part of speech?
Subject.
And ate.
Verb.
And apple?
Object.
Object. So it is your subject, and gives is the verb, and impression is what?
Object.
The object. OBJ. Let's take another look at a detail of that painting that we were just looking at, where you just focus in on the hat. Very little of that is painted in white, and we're not looking at an original. You can see yellow in the part that frames her face, and you can see violet and green and blue, some of these other colors, but it's those other colors that give it the impression of being a starched white hat, which tells you something else about the women who lived in Holland, young unmarried women in particular, in Vermeer's time. They hid their hair. The only people who would have had long hair that would be visible, they would either be entertainers, right, or they would be other kinds of women, not young ladies. In number 20, since January of 1665, Griet has gradually become an assistant to Johannes Vermeer. Ben, if has become is your verb, your subject is?
Greet.
Griet. And the kind of clause is?
Main.
And the kind of sentence is?
Simple.
So this would be Griet. I agree. It started with a request on the master's part to have Griet carry a pouch to the local apothecary with instructions for purchasing a new supply of bone black and ochre to be ground into pigments for the artist's paints. Yvonne, if the verb is started, the subject is?
It.
And the kind of clause is?
Main clause,
And the kind of sentence is?
simple sentence.
So it is the subject, and I have a question. We looked this up the other day. An apothecary is what?
One who prepares and sells drugs or compounds for medicinal purposes.
Right. And he also was one who sold these oddball things that an artist is going to use, like bone black and ochre. What is ochre, Maritza?
The color.
Well, is it a blue color?
It's a yellow tonish color.
It's not really a yellow color. Let's look it up. I wouldn't have said it was yellow. Look it up.
Well, it looks like yellow to me, but actually it's not like a yellow. It looks like mustard.
It's not in here.
If it's not in there, go to the regular dictionary, and American English may spell it this way, O-C-H-R-E. Try it both ways. Let's see what we get. Ochre.
Okay, ochre. Red or yellow pigment.
Red or yellow?
Yeah.
And is it spelled R-E or E-R?
I have O-C-H-E-R.
Okay, so it's a red-yellow pigment. Red or yellow, you said. Red or yellow pigment. One of the amazing thing about artists, and it really is amazing, at least it was to me when I first started to paint, was that when you go into a museum with an artist, the artist can look at the painting and say, well, that artist used phthalo blue. I'm now talking about a synthetic color of blue that didn't live when Vermeer lived, or that is red lake or red vermilion. Your eye trains very quickly to be able to tell what color, not just that it's red, but what kind of a color it is. But again, there are 500 shades of paint in Liquitex and in oil, and you can go buy all 500 if you have the money. But usually a good color teacher for a painter has you buy only 5 tubes of paint. Can you imagine what the colors are? What would they be, Vince?
Red, blue, yellow,
Those
black,
are the
and
primaries?
white.
Exactly. Red, blue, yellow, black, and white. And it's hard to believe, but with red, blue, yellow, black, and white, you can produce any color you can imagine. From magenta to chartreuse to pink, so forth. Now, let's take a look at 22. Up until that time, only the master had gone to the doctor of medicine to buy raw materials for his work. So had gone is the verb, and the subject, Scott, is what?
Master?
Master. And the kind of clause is?
Main?
The kind of sentence is?
Simple?
Okay, so this would be master.
And what's that, those two words before, only the master, is that modifying?
I would
The
say those
master?
are adjectives, right? They just
Adjectives.
modify the master. Griet will soon be asked to buy linseed oil from the apothecary, as well as pig bladders from the butcher, to keep valuable colors of mixed paints from drying out. So if will be asked to buy, Pippa, is your verb, where's your subject?
Greet.
Griet. And what kind of a clause?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple.
Now, we mentioned this the other day. Actually, the pig bladders came from the butcher, not the apothecary. But the oil that you needed to use with those ground up powders to make oil paint because you couldn't buy it would have come from the apothecary. Remember the reason for having a pig bladder, Justin? What would it be? Part of the painter's equipment, what would it be, Jessica? Jessica is over here.
It kept the paint from drying out.
Right, once they mixed the powder with the linseed oil to get it to the right consistency, whatever it was, if it was going to be used for any amount of time, it had to go in the pig bladder, which was kept shut, not with a screw-on cap, but what, Jeff?
A plug?
What kind of a plug? Anybody remember that? What was it, Janice?
A nail?
A nail, imagine that. There are pictures of those. She learns to lay out the master's paints each day and to observe the hole punched in each bladder, enabling the artist to squeeze out small amounts of paint when needed while using a nail to keep it shut when not in use. If learns to lay and to observe are the verb parts here, and I'll come back to that. Janice, the subject is what?
She.
She. And the kind of clause is?
Main clause.
And the kind of sentence is?
Simple.
So she is the subject. This is a helping verb, learns, and it goes with this half verb and this half verb. You see that? Learns to lay, learns to observe. Both of those are part of the main verb. Let's try 25. She will soon be able to recognize and to refer to colors by their proper names, surprisingly short time that takes, such as rich dark ultramarine blue, bright red vermilion, and earth colors like brown and yellow ochre. Jerry, if the verb is will be, I wonder where the subject is.
She,
What kind of a clause is it?
main,
What kind of a sentence is it?
simple sentence.
I bet some of you think that there's more verb than I marked. Who thinks there's more verb? Who thinks I didn't quite get this right? Do you, Scott?
No, but it's tempting to say able's part of the verb.
And if you said able was part of the verb, you'd say even more was
Able
part of
to
the verb.
recognize
And then you'd say even more.
and to refer.
Right, so let's stop with that for a minute. Do you agree with that, Ben? Able is part of the verb?
I do.
Oh, you
but,
do?
like,
Good. That means time to get out a dictionary and let's check it. Got a dictionary?
I don't.
Reach right behind you. Farrah has one. Farrah, loan Ben your dictionary. Loan it to him. Look up able. We don't even want to know what it means at the moment. We just want to know if it can be a verb at any time, able. Can it?
Adjective.
Adjective. So mark it ADJ. I must say that's a mistake I made for an awful long time because able means the same thing as can, but it's not a verb. It's not a verb. That means that to recognize are half verbs, not part of the main verb. And how can you tell? If you try and piece it together, she will soon be to recognize able and to refer. It makes just a little bit less than no sense at all. So those are half verbs, but your whole verb here is only will and be. Question?
And I noticed that able doesn't work in the verb check.
No. I able, you able, he able, we able. Absolutely right, it doesn't. Are you looking up ultramarine, Scott, by any chance? Maybe vermilion.
No.
Nope. Anybody looking up those words? Justin, what's ultramarine?
Oh, I looked up vermilion.
What is vermilion?
Vivid reddish orange.
A red-orange. Important? Well, like I told you, when you're expanding your vocabulary, you don't know what you're going to see again. What is ultramarine? What is it, Jerry?
It's a mild blue.
Mild blue?
It's not a dark blue, but it's not a light blue. It's
Did you
almost
look
right.
that up?
Oh, I know that for a fact.
Okay, let's see what the dictionary says.
Deep blue pigment or
Deep.
color.
Deep. And when it's ground from lapis lazuli, which is a precious stone. Yeah, I thought when you said light, I'm thinking, I don't think so. But again, don't go by what you know.
But
Go
I
by
paint with
checking.
that color, and it's a
I
mild
do
blue.
too.
I
do too.
know,
It's a
it's-
dark
it
blue.
looks-
Ultramarine is a dark blue. Your lighter blues would be cobalt. Cobalt.
Oh,
would be
the
much-
brilliant blue. The brilliant blue is lighter than ultra blue. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, according to navy blue, it's just almost
Right.
right. smack in
Relative
the
to
middle.
navy blue, it's light, but it's a deep
Deep
blue,
blue.
right? Good. Do you paint, Jerry? Mm-hmm. Have you painted anything that we would like to look at one day? If you think you have, bring something in. Bring
It
something in.
depends
This
how
is
well
after.
it zooms on these cameras.
No, okay, this is after all an art course as well. Art, you're going to become an art historian, remember we said, as well as a grammarian. Take a look at this. From time to time, she will be asked to stand in for the baker's daughter to enable Master Vermeer to check on the progress of his current painting. Jeff, if will be asked to stand is the verb, where's the subject?
She,
How about the kind of clause?
main clause,
What kind of sentence is it?
a simple sentence.
My guess is there's still a lot of that done with live models today, although today you could take a snapshot and you wouldn't have to have somebody stand in for part of that time, but Vermeer didn't have that as an option. While looking out of the studio window at clouds coloring the sky, Greet is taught to develop a keen sense of color. Scott, if is taught to develop is your verb, your subject is,
Great.
and the kind of clause is,
The main.
and the kind of sentence.
Simple.
Right. So there she is. That's a lesson in color. Go out and look at the sky, look at the clouds, and tell me what you see. So she's looking at the clouds. And before she gives him an answer, she's asked to remember, Vermeer is asking her to remember, the wheel of vegetables cut up for the evening soup in her mother's kitchen so long ago. Amy, if is asked to remember is your verb, where is your subject?
She.
She. What kind of a clause?
Main.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
Simple. You remember anything about those vegetables that she cut up in the kitchen at the beginning of the story? Something odd about it? Her mother was making soup? Somebody in my home, if I could get anybody to cut up vegetables, would just cut up one and throw it into the pot and hope for the best. What do you remember? What do you remember, Kim, about?
She separated it as into like a pie or
Right.
something.
And did what? Why did she bother to separate it? The mother was just going to scoop all those vegetables into the soup pot when it started to boil. What was she interested in doing?
The color was
The
it?
colors. Remember, she had orange carrot, little carrot slice in the middle, and she had purple cabbage somewhere, and she had these leeks, which are sort of white, and onions, which are sort of white, and she had all the vegetables separated, making a pie-shaped picture. And Vermeer asked her this, your turnips and your onions, are they the same white? Are, Jerry, is the verb. Where is the subject?
I'm kind of stumped between your and turnips and onions.
Well, that's strike one. That's strike two.
And strike three. So
They're at strike three, right?
my
Yeah,
only
you're
assumption
completely in
would
left
be
field on this one.
they.
It's got to be they. And what kind of a clause is it?
This must be a main clause.
Sure. What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Now, we'll put down they. Notice your verb came in front of your subject. Do you have any idea why?
Because it goes. No, never mind. I can't.
Okay, remember what we said about questions? Where are you going? You turn it into a statement. Turn it into a statement for me. Where are you going becomes,
You are going where?
and then your subject becomes.
In front. So
Think about it. Don't skip this sentence. Forget about it completely. You are going where? Your subject becomes,
you
and your verb is.
going where or
No,
going?
no, think what you said. Where
I
are
don't get
you
it.
going? You are going where? You bring up an interesting point. I'm going to come back to that point in a minute. You is the subject. I agree. Where's your verb?
Going
Half.
where?
I where?
You
Are. So the whole verb is
are going.
are going. Now, turn this around. Are they the same white?
They are the same white.
They are the same white. Notice, by the way, that dash, that prevents a fragment. You have some lead-in word, your turnips and your onions. A dash is simply a long pause. Are they the same white? That is not a fragment. That's a complete main clause. It's a complete simple sentence. Here's the point that you reminded me about, Jerry, and you did it beautifully.
Oh,
When
goody.
you're processing new information, I say this seriously, if you're not reviewing daily, 24/7, you lose 86% of what you learn in 2 weeks' time. Now, wasn't it a week ago, last week, that a couple lectures ago, we went through, maybe the very last
5
lecture, we
days.
went through questions, and you took the questions and you turned them into statements, and you said, here's a subject, here's a verb. So every time you see a question, be prepared for an inversion, because even though it doesn't happen all of the time, I'll bet 95% of the time, questions are inverted clauses. Let's take a look at 30. Remembering the hint of green in the turnips and the yellow in the onions, Greet looks out of the window with a thrill of excitement and sees blue, yellow, and green tints in ordinary, everyday clouds. Pippa, if the verbs are looks and sees, where is your subject?
Greet,
What kind of a clause?
main,
What kind of a sentence?
simple.
And Greet is the subject. Now notice this, blue, yellow, and green tints, so the clouds aren't white. What I expect each of you to do today when you go outside, it's a nice day, is to look out at the sky and see if you see those different colors, because an artist who's going to paint clouds isn't going to paint white clouds. He's going to have tints of those other colors in it, and I'm just wondering, when you look at the clouds, might be a question I ask the next time, if you see those different colors that she's training her eye to see. Yes, Scott?
I have a question back on number 25.
Let me find it. 25. Go ahead and ask the question, and I'll find it
It
while you
says,
ask
she
it.
will soon be able to recognize and to refer to colors by their proper names, such as rich, dark, so on, so on, so on.
Okay, I'm here.
You made mention about able not being there because it's an adjective.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's my question. If you go back to page 38, there are two examples where an adjective was in between the verb.
Is it one of the ones we just did right now
No.
on this exercise?
No, it's
Then you're going to have to read the example to me.
Okay. The
Give
example
us the page.
is
You said it's on
page
what?
38
Yes.
of the palette book. It says
Okay.
the skin surrounding his eye sockets has been permanently sewn shut by a surgeon. Has been sewn shut was the verb. Skin was the subject. But it says has been permanently sewn shut. Permanently is an adjective in between the two verbs.
Right, it's not your verb.
Right.
And sometimes it's a verb, sometimes it's an adverb, and you can tell by that ly ending. I agree with you so far.
So since you have an adjective here and it's still, the verb sort of wraps around the adjective, why can't it also wrap around this adjective in number 25?
Well, in 25, I can't see how you can piece that together. See, on the one that you have, I'll go back to this one in a minute. On the one you have, take that ly word and move it somewhere. Read that to me again and move the position of the ly word.
The skin surrounding the eye sockets has been sewn shut by a surgeon permanently.
There. But can you do this? Can you say, she will soon be to recognize and to refer to colors able?
No.
You just can't do it.
Okay.
And that's why that's why that test for checking a complete verb is, can you piece those parts together? Do they make sense? In the one that you read on page 35, it made perfect sense. You can move probably or whatever permanently anywhere you like. Here you can't. So that adjective cuts off the main verb from the two half verbs that follow. In fact, I would have said to recognize and to refer to colors. I would have called that whole thing a verb phrase. I would have called it a little bit later an infinitive phrase. Right now, I just would have said that was a verb phrase. And I wouldn't have stopped until I got to this prep phrase that acts as the object of those two half verbs. Okay? Yes, Scott?
There's two sentences in this exercise that contain quotation marks.
Give me the numbers.
29
And where's the other one?
and 7. I think it's number 7.
Wait,
And
let me just go back and find number 7. I'm close, but I'm not quite there. 5, 6. We'll take them one at a time. 7 is wrong. I had an extra quote in there. Let's look at 7 first. Okay, it should be, according to Vermeer, comma, 1 double quote, not 2. The camera obscura helps me to see in a different way. Now, what were you going to ask about that?
Just that I sometimes, I'm a little bit confused by quotation marks, and so I think that the subject can't be within quotation marks, but that doesn't, the subject can be within a quote, right?
Well, in this case, it's the only place it could be, because if I asked you what is according to Vermeer, you would tell me that's a what?
What, are you asking me what
Part
is
of
a-
speech.
according to Vermeer?
Right.
It's a
It's a
preposition.
prepositional phrase. I can toss it right out of the sentence, can't I?
Right.
And then I'm definitely going to start with, the camera obscura helps me to see in a different way. Right? That's all I'd have.
So don't let the quotation marks intimidate you. If it's
No.
there, it's there.
No, we had another one. I don't remember what the number was, but it was look. And
Right.
that was in the middle of a quote too, and the subject was implied and not even in that framework. But since you have another one you wanted to ask a question.
29.
But before you get there, I want to point out something that I see done wrong all the time. The end punctuation goes inside the quote. It's not quote and then period. It's not quote on top of period. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions. The end punctuation goes inside the quote. Be careful of that. And then you said 29. Okay. Your turnips and your onions, are they the same white?
And they's the subject, and it's within the quotes, and
The whole thing
there-
is a
the whole-
quote.
Yeah, right, so the subject must be within the quotes. So
Sure.
don't let the quotes
Oh,
throw
no.
you.
No, not at all. They have nothing to do with that. Maritza, wasn't it you? Who did the one that said look?
That was number 14.
Let me just find it for a second. Because that one,
That was also
that was
inside of the
also all quotes and no introductory words. The whole thing was a quote. So let me just find that for a minute if I can. Here. Look over your shoulder at me. It's all you've got. The whole thing's in quotes. So the verb is clearly look, and because it's in command form, the subject is an implied understood you.
Right.
Right. Yeah, quotes are nothing to be intimidated about, but get that end period and often an end comma inside the quotes. Yes, Maritza?
Now that we're talking about quotation, it is quotation is a simple sentence, but do the quotation mark has to be followed before or after it is, like a she say or he say, comma, and
Right,
quote.
the speaker clause business. We're going to get to that when we get into the
But in this
compound
case,
sentence.
this look over your shoulder, is not at a speaking clause,
There's
right?
none. If
Okay.
Vermeer said, comma, quote, look over your shoulder at me. For a start, how many clauses would you have? If this said, let's just make it say that. If it said,
Oh, that would become a second main clause.
it would
Vermeer
become a
said.
second main clause. It would
Yeah.
be Vermeer said, comma, quote, but yes, this would be a
Be a
subject, this would be a verb, and then you wouldn't have one main clause, you'd have
have
two.
two main
And if you had two, it wouldn't be a simple sentence, would it?
Yeah.
So there is no speaker clause in sight. Anybody else with a question? Okay, we're going to start the second exercise. We'll just get a little way through it, and then we'll do something else. I have something else set up for you if we have time today, but let's try this. This is where nothing's marked on page 55, and you were to find the subjects and the verbs in these simple sentences, and the directions told you this. You were told, in each example, underline the subject in each main clause and underline the verb twice, as we've been doing. I would also mark and label clauses. You were told to write the subject word or words in the first blank space and the verb word or words in the second blank space. And a reminder that when you write out the subject and verb words, you're increasing your awareness. I'm now looking at a subject, I'm now looking at a verb, and I think that's an important thing to do. In this first example, which is marked for you in the book on page 55, it would go this way. In March of 1665, Greet turned 17. So you'd have a line under Greet, two under turns. Before you went any further, you'd label that M-1, SS. You would put Greet, this is the important part, writing it out, as your subject and turns as your verb. That's all there is to it. Amy, look at this one with me. We marked it the other day, but we'll remark it now. She finds herself drawn like a magnet to Vermeer's compelling personality. So your subject is she, and your verb is
Fine.
finds, and the kind of clause is,
Main.
and the kind of sentence is.
Simple.
So you would write out she, and you would write out finds. Okay. A much longer sentence, but definitely still a sentence. She now understands his initial use of false colors of a red-brownish sort to rough out unpainted sections of a canvas, such as a basin and a pitcher, before painting over them in hues of yellow, green, blue, and brown to make them look like silver lit up by the sun. Scott, what would you say the subject in this is?
She
And how about the verb?
understands,
What kind of a clause?
the main clause,
What kind of a sentence?
simple sentence.
And I just want to mark this for a minute. It would be she here. And I'm going to show you another use of the quote. Understands. If you're doing slang or catchphrasing or some kind of terminology that is peculiar to a particular trade, in this case an artist would know what false colors are. The underpainting is really what we're talking about here. That would go in quotes. False colors. They're not really false colors. Usually you do an underpainting in reddish brown shades, and then you paint over that. Yes, Jerry, I'm listening.
So basically, the false colors are basically an undercoat?
The underpainting. When you paint, do you do an underpainting?
Yeah, but
Okay, the underpainting is usually done in a sienna or wherever you say it's going to be, whatever value you want that to give to the finished painting, and you paint the whole painting in that monochrome. And then you start adding color.
right.
And some of that color bleeds through. Well, it's odd to her when she goes to look at the still life of this painting that he's constructing, and she sees all of these things, this basin, this pitcher, painted this red brownish color, when she's looking at the picture and she says it's silver. And she's thinking to herself, why didn't he just paint it silver, right? So the false colors are put on first, and then the other colors are applied to the top of that, and the colors finally reflected the pattern of the rug, the girl's bodice, the blue cloth draped over the chair, everything but their true silver color. Farah, where is your subject?
Colors.
Colors. Where is your verb?
Reflected.
What kind of a clause?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
So it's going to be colors, and it's going to be reflected. Now, do you understand what's happening there? I mean, today I told you one thing, go out and look at the clouds and see if they're dead white. I'm sure they're not going to be dead white. The other thing is to take a picture, something bright and shiny that is reflective, and put it next to a bowl of fruit or next to anything you want to see, and it will pick up the colors in what it's next to. You know what I'm saying? If you have it next to some oranges and apples and it's a bright, highly polished surface, it's going to pick up the color of the apple, the color of the orange. If you have somebody sitting next to it, it's going to pick up that color, and it's going to really look like every color but the silver that it actually consists of. But I have another question, and my question is this. Amy, no, you know what? I'm going to ask a man. I'm going to ask Ben, what in the world is a girl's bodice? I wonder what that is.
I have no idea.
Reach back for that dictionary right behind your head. Farrah's going to loan one. You need one. A dictionary is an important part of your daily equipment. Bodice. I'm not sure I couldn't have asked a woman and gotten an I don't know, but it's an important term. What does it mean? Scott's looking it up too.
Oh. Close-fitting part of a dress above the waist.
Yes, the part of the dress above the waist. Make a note on that. Right? Nobody in the studio is wearing a dress. But if you can imagine, if I were wearing a dress and the bottom half of this was attached to a skirt and it broke here and went into the skirt, then the bodice would be the top part of the dress. That's all it means. Take a look again at a detail of young woman with a jug, that one of the baker's daughter that we were looking at before. And it's hard to see in this, but the false colors you can see are pretty much a red brownish underpainting. But then when he completes that, all of the colors of that rug and everything next to it are reflected in that picture. And it's not a solid silver or a solid brass. If you look at the actual painting, the reflected colors from the rug, from the dress, if somebody's sitting close to it, are all reflected in that picture. Be aware of that when you look at a painting. It's never painted flat. Okay, on number 4. Johannes Vermeer also has his eyes riveted on Griet's every move and on the attention paid to her by Peter, the butcher's handsome young son, and by Van Reejwen, the lecherous patron of his art. Maritza, where's the subject?
Johannes Vermeer
And what about the verb?
has
What kind of a clause?
a main clause,
What kind of a sentence?
a simple sentence.
So again, take the time to write that out. Anybody think he or she saw more verb than Maritza picked up? What'd you see, Justin?
Saw riveted.
I did too. Well, let's see if it's a whole verb or a half verb. Notice it has that troublesome ed ending. If you said Johannes Vermeer also riveted on Griet's every move, it would not be a whole verb. But you could say Johannes Vermeer also has his eyes on Griet's every move. So this turns out to be a half verb, surely a verb. But that ed ending tells you it's a half verb rather than a whole verb. I have one thing, and then we'll stop for a second. I just want to know one thing. I want to know what lecherous is. If somebody says to you, Scott, you are lecherous, do you say thank you, or do you say how dare you? Let's find out. Yes, let's definitely find out whether that's a thank you or a how dare you. Lecherous.
Given to an overindulgence of sexual activity.
Right. So let's just make a little note somewhere here. Overly interested in sexual activity. A roving eye, if you know what I mean. So if somebody says to you, Scott, you're lecherous, what do you say? How dare you or thank you?
I just walk away.
I just walk away. What would you say, Jerry?
I'd probably blush and go hide.
Go hide. Most people, I would think, would say, how dare you? So we'll take a look at number 5 next, and this is what it says. When showing Greet how to grind a charred stick of ivory into a fine powder by using a smooth stone and the pressure of her wrist to blend the black pigment with a gummy substance, she drops the grinding device on the floor at the touch of his hand upon hers. Farah, where's the subject in all of this? She. Much louder. Where's your verb?
Drops.
Drops. What kind of a clause?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
So let's make a note of that. I have another question, Farah. Why would she drop that grinding device? It's a mortar and a pestle kind of thing. Why would she drop that on the floor, do you suppose? Do you think she's careless and clumsy here? She's so good that when she goes to clean these still life compositions, she never messes a single fold. Amy, why would she drop that grinding device on the floor?
Instead of being nervous.
Nervous? I don't think that's the problem. I want to read this again. I want to figure out what's happening here. When showing Greet how to grind a charred stick of ivory into a fine powder by using a smooth stone and the pressure of her wrist to blend the black pigment with a gummy substance, she drops the grinding device on the floor at the touch of his hand upon hers. What's happening here, Elbelin? What do you think's happening? Jessica, what's happening?
Jessica? Jessica, I guess she's surprised that he touched her. I don't know, and she drops
so
it.
what difference does that make? If Jeff touches you, are your books going to fall to the floor?
She likes him, maybe.
Yeah, she's falling in love with him, right? And she's thinking that maybe he's falling in love with her. He's a married man. He's got 6 children at this point. 7th is on the way, and we know that 8, 9, 10, and 11 are not far behind that. But this is in her mind. Added time spent in the attic above the studio leads to time being taken away from Greet's daily chores involving washing and ironing clothes for the family under the watchful eye of Ramir's wife, Katerina. Janice, where's my subject?
Greet or chores?
Okay, let's go a different way. Let's go a different way. Where's the verb?
I'm kind of confused with this sentence.
All right, I'm going to read it again. Now you concentrate, and I'm going to read it again. We're not going to give you any help. Added time spent in the attic above the studio leads to time being taken away from Greet's daily chores involving washing and ironing clothes for the family under the watchful eye of Ramir's wife, Katerina. You know what? I only want the verb.
Spent.
Spent? I'm going to put a check above that, and I'm going to say I don't think so. Vince, what do you say the main verb is?
Well, actually, I got spent.
Okay, the two of you are stuck on that. Justin, what would you say?
Let's say washing and ironing.
I'll get some checks on those too. What do you think, Kim? Where's the verb?
Leads?
I think it's leads. And then you have to ask yourself, what leads to time being taken away?
Chores.
Chores? Well, actually, from Greet's daily chores is going to give us a throwaway prepositional phrase. Who knows? Jeff?
Washing, ironing clothes.
Well, I think involving washing and ironing clothes, see these ing endings? We're looking at half verbs here. well, this is also a half verb. That's a verb phrase. It's much too late. I'm going to try my question again. What leads to time being taken away from Greet's daily chores? What do you say, Maritza?
I have time as a subject.
Which time is it? Where is it?
The first time, added time.
That's it. Time leads to time being taken away. Time leads to time being taken away. Maritza, what kind of a clause is that?
It's a main clause.
It is a main clause. And what kind of a sentence is it?
A simple
A
sentence.
simple sentence. And then let's just spend a little bit more time on this particular one. So it's going to be time leads. That's what we need to see. If it were spent, and we had a period, added time spent in the attic, period, would that be a sentence? No. So this is a half verb. You can tell. But if we say added time leads to time being taken away, that holds perfectly fine. And we just talked about washing and ironing. Those ing endings indicate that they're half verbs and not whole verbs. Clear? Any other questions about this? It was tricky. I'll agree with you. That was tricky. Let's try another one. And with the wet nurse hired to feed the new baby, Franciscus, snoring loudly in the bedroom shared with the other maid, there is a need to change Tonica's sleeping quarters. Remember, she's the other maid who's working alongside of Greet, the senior maid, as it were. Justin, how about a verb? I don't see a subject, so I'm looking for a verb.
I would say snoring, but that's like a half verb.
That's right. I agree with you on that, and good for spotting that half verb. That ing ending tells you it's not a whole verb. Amy, where's a verb?
Feed.
Feed? Well, look at to feed, though. See? That part of it for sure is a half verb. There might be more. Ben, where's the verb?
Hired.
Hired? That's another half verb. I know again in math, a half and a half makes a whole, but in English, a half and a half makes a half. Jessica, where's the verb?
Hired.
Oh, we already took care of hired.
Oh.
What do you say, Elbelin? Where's the verb?
Is a need to change?
One word.
Is.
Nail it. That's the one, people. And box off there. I hope you see that that clause is going to start with there. I would box off there. I would highlight it. I would get a check above it. There, like here, is one of those watch out words that we talked about the other day that often triggers an inversion. It's certainly doing it here. When you get that far, you can ask yourself a question, Elbelin, to lead you to the subject. What is there? And it's going to come out to be one word. At most two. So here's the question. What is there? I'm looking for the subject.
A need.
Sure. So here's my subject, here's my verb. I can see that I have an inverted clause. What kind of a clause is this?
Main.
Exactly. And what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
So my verb is going to be is, and my subject is going to be a need. Now here's something else. That's an inverted clause. Take it from there, Elbelin, to the end of the sentence and turn that around into normal word order. You always can with an inverted clause. Flip it around.
Is there a need to change?
Nope, you're not doing it. You're just turning it into a question. Is there a need to change? You still have an inverted clause. You started with is. Ben, can you turn that around and give me normal word order on that? Can you do it, Farah? Loud.
A need to change Tanika sleeping quarters is there.
Or a need is there. You're right, both ways work. Either, this is what Farah said, a need to change Tonica's sleeping quarters is there, or, to make it more obvious, a need is there to change Tonica's sleeping quarters. This whole thing with the wet nurse hired to feed the new baby, if you had a period, you'd have a fragment. Those are half verbs. Snoring is a half verb. You don't hit a clause until you get to this part of the sentence, starting with there. Well, I found out something I want to know about. A wet nurse. What is a wet nurse, Pippa?
I know my own definition for it.
No, I don't think I want that one. And I'm not sure there is one in the back of the book, but let's check. Look at the context. And with the wet nurse hired to feed the new baby, Franciscus, snoring loudly in the bedroom shared with the other maid, there is a need to change Tonica's sleeping quarters. So I wonder what a wet nurse is.
A wet nurse is a woman who cares for and nurtures a small baby or child by breastfeeding milk to a child that is not her own.
Okay, can we boil that down to a couple of words? Read it again.
A woman who cares for and nurtures a small baby or child by breastfeeding milk to a child that is not her own.
What are you going to write down?
Breastfeeds milk to a child that is not her own.
All those words. I'll take this part, see if you can't shorten that down. Breastfeeds who?
Other children that aren't hers.
Another mother's or person's
Baby.
exactly. Right. You see, the problem with Vermeer's wife, that one with the blonde hair and the brittle curls that we met in the very beginning, Katerina Bowles, as Tracy Chevalier has presented it, is she's got all these babies and she's willing to give all these children to Vermeer, but she doesn't want to be woken up in the middle of the night to feed a child. What a pain. So if she hires a wet nurse, never mind the fact that they have no money, then the wet nurse is going to be able to feed the child, breastfeed the child, and she can sleep through the night. Ben? Why not?
Sounds funny to me.
Oh, we're going to go by sound. Yes, it's been done. We're going to get into that and as a coordinate connective, and it's been done like that for at least the last 55 years, and it's absolutely correct to start a sentence with and. Do you have to? No. Can you do it? That's another story, yes, and you're grammatically correct to do so. We will get into that when we get into the compound sentence. That's going to come up again as an issue, but it's a good question. Yes?
On the wet nurse, how the person become a wet nurse? Did she have to be a mother also, or?
Yes. She would have to be nursing a child of her own and be able to produce extra milk enough to feed 2 babies instead of 1. You know, sometimes somebody has twins. And they decide that they want to breastfeed twins. Well, if that person's going to be able to do it, it has to be somebody who's producing enough milk to do their own baby and another baby. Interesting. Right. Let's try number 8. Following Vermeer's suggestion of giving Tanike the cellar storeroom to use as her bedroom, Greet is asked to move out of the cellar and into the attic above the studio, making it possible for her to grind more pigments without being noticed by other members of the household. Amy, where is my subject?
Read.
Greet. And how about the verb?
Is asked
50%
to move.
is asked to move. What kind of a clause are we looking at?
Main.
It's a main clause. What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
It's certainly a simple sentence. So it's going to be Greet is asked to move. And in passing, this is a half verb, this is a half verb, and in this particular sentence is a helping verb. So it's taking 4 words to give us the complete verb. Anybody with a question? Okay. Side by side, the artist and his only assistant stand close together, grinding pigments, washing colors, and pouring water from a pitcher over each other's hands before scrubbing themselves clean. Yvonne, where's the subject?
Artist and assistant is what I put down.
I put that down too. And where's the verb?
And
What kind of a clause?
main clause.
What kind of a
Simple
sentence? So it's going to be 2 subjects here, artist / assistant, stand. Now, the interesting thing about this is, remember, other painters in Holland, in Delft at the time, are producing about a painting a week, maybe 50 a year. They can probably feed their families. He's doing 2 a year. And he's never worked with apprentices. He's never been like Rembrandt, who had 5 or 6 apprentices living in his studio, living in his home that he's training, who help him prepare canvases. Everything he does is on his own. And now he's got somebody who's been hired basically to wash clothes and fetch water from the canal to be up in the attic. And remember, the wife can't even walk into the studio. And so there's going to be some jealousy taking place there. The warmth of the master's body warms Greet's heart and takes away the chill of cold winter days. Scott, where's your subject?
Warmth?
And what about the verb?
Warms and takes,
Right. And so this is what kind of a clause?
a main clause,
And what kind of a sentence?
simple sentence.
So it's warmth, and it's warms / takes. Interesting thing about Holland in the winter, I should have bought some, I certainly looked at them, is the canals freeze over and people go skating. But they go skating on something you've never seen in your life. They're wooden skates. Very strange, that go on attached to their feet somehow. They're not like any ice skates. They don't look like what Katarina Witt would wear in a public performance. And they skate over those frozen canals, and that's how they can get from one place to the other very quickly. They pride themselves on that in the winter. Number 11, in July, Van Riejwen commissions a new painting from Vermeer with his wife looking out toward the painter. Jeff, a subject.
Van Robin,
Yeah, that name, Van Riejwen. And the verb,
commission,
commissions, and the kind of a clause,
main clause,
and the kind of a sentence.
simple sentence.
So the subject, I have another question brewing here, is Van Riejwen, and the verb is commissions. And that was going to be my next question. What does that mean? What does commissions mean? Well, there's the dictionary. Good that Farah has one. Artists often work by commission. I wonder what that means. Nobody knows? Tell me what you think it means, Jerry, and he's looking it up. We're going to get it accurate here in a minute.
By trade, as an apprentice, I only got paid working on cars when I was working on cars. By commission, when I was given a job and I was working on the job, I got paid. When I was idle, I didn't.
No, it doesn't mean the same thing, though.
No?
Like, for example, if you were selling, I don't know, television sets at Circuit City or someplace like that, and you sold a real expensive one, you might get a commission, a portion of the
A
pay because
percentage
you
of the-
sold, right? But that's not what it means here at all. What do you get from that, Jeff? Read to us.
A warrant granting certain powers and imposing certain duties.
Keep going.
A certificate conferring military rank
Forget
and
that one. Give us another one.
authority to act as agent for another.
No?
Something to be done by an agent.
More?
A body of persons charged with performing a duty.
Nope.
The doing of some act, also the things done.
That's it? That's the whole picture. What were you going to say, Pippa?
Commissioning artwork in the sense of art is having someone make you, specifically for you, a piece of art, and you offer to pay them for it, but you pay them in increments until the art piece is completed and given to you.
Right. It's a fee negotiated in advance for an artwork. Right? I want you to paint a picture of my wife looking out toward you, the painter. How much are you willing to give me for that painting? Well, you remember in Vermeer's day it wasn't very much. I'm willing to pay you $80. Okay. I will give you a sketch. At least that's the way it would work now. And I will charge you an increment of the amount that the entire painting is going to cost. But you remember poor Vermeer was trying to get bread on the table. He didn't work that way. But it meant that he would be commissioned in advance, offered a certain amount of money to do a particular portrait of this man's wife. Now, it's interesting that he wanted a portrait of his wife done again because he has a wandering eye. Now, this is the painting that he commissions that we're going to see next. It's Vermeer's painting called A Lady Riding. And as you can see, when we looked at her before, we had this particular woman wearing that yellow mantle. Can we see the image of a lady riding? We had her trying to put on a pearl necklace. But now she's looking directly at the artist wearing the same yellow satin, ermine-trimmed mantle, but she's looking directly at the artist. So that would be Van Riejwen's wife. Date of that painting is 1665. And it's the cover that Catherine Weber decided to use on her book, The Music Lesson, but it has nothing to do with the music lesson. Let's take a look at 12. Greet is told about an earlier painting with Van Riejwen and one of his kitchen maids dressed in a red gown belonging to his wife, drinking wine from a perpetually filled wine glass. In other words, this isn't the first time Van Riejwen has commissioned an unusual request. And Jerry, where's your subject in this one?
Agreed.
How about the verb?
Is told.
And the kind of clause?
Main.
And the kind of sentence?
Simple.
So Greet is told. Now look at that. About an earlier painting with Van Riejwen and one of his kitchen maids dressed in a red gown belonging to the wife yet drinking wine from a perpetually filled wine glass. What do you think would be the upshot of such a painting? Why would Van Riejwen have his kitchen maid borrow his wife's dress, have a painting of her drinking wine, and all the while she's modeling for that painting, the wine glass is topped up? What's likely to happen, Yvonne?
Some sexual activity,
Yeah, resulting in, at worst, what?
pregnancy.
Sure. Take a look at the painting in question. This was an earlier commission by Van Riejwen. This one is called The Glass of Wine. And there she is, holding a glass in her hands, wearing the wife's dress, not Greet. This is Van Riejwen's maid. And this wine glass is perpetually filled, which spells trouble. And the other maids are warning Greet, watch out. Don't get involved in being a part of a painting with this man. On number 13, the end result was the maid, sure enough, becoming pregnant, losing her job, and having the disgrace and a possible need to care for a newborn child born out of wedlock. Justin, where's my subject?
Result?
About the verb.
Was?
Type of clause.
Main?
Type of sentence.
Simple?
Let's try the next one. Vermeer takes a sidestep here. Johannes Vermeer tells Greet about the spiritual quality of paintings like his, honoring simple, everyday things, such as a table or a chair, a bowl and a pitcher, or a soldier and a maid. Vince, where's my subject?
Johannes Vermeer.
Right, and the verb?
Pels.
And the kind of clause?
Main.
The kind of sentence?
Simple.
So it's Johannes Vermeer and tells. Now here's one for you, Scott, tailor-made. Are they not celebrating God's creation as well? Where's your verb?
Are.
Where's your subject?
They.
What kind of a clause is it?
Main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
Did you pick up the whole verb?
Are celebrating.
So are celebrating. Look what's happening here. You have an inverted clause, right? The verb comes first. You get a piece of the subject, but because the verb consists of more than one word, it divides around the subject in that way. Turn that around to normal word order and make it a statement, Scott.
They are not celebrating God's creation as well.
Right. They are not celebrating God's creation as well. Now here's a new wrinkle in that picture. Not only are your subject and verb contained in that quote, but because the quote doesn't start right here, there's some words missing, we don't know how many in that particular sentence, then it's 3 periods and a lowercase a. Jerry?
Why 3 periods?
Because 3 periods indicates words missing from a sentence in an actual quote. 4 would indicate sentences missing from a quoted passage. It could be paragraphs or sentences. You'll see more of that. Janice?
So there's no space as well between the ellipses and the A?
No. Now, some handbooks tell you space those periods and go this way and then hit your R. But I don't use it. You see a style sheet that asks you to do that, then you would just space it in a different way. Right, but 3 periods indicates words missing from this quote. Let's try 16. In October, Van Riejwen is ready to commission still another painting from Vermeer, this time with Greet, the wide-eyed maid, included in the portrait, together with him, posed as a musician playing a lute. Scott, where's your subject in this?
Van Rijwen
And how about the verb?
is ready to commission.
And what kind of a clause?
It's a main clause.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
Right. So it's Van Rijwen, and then is ready to commission. Ready can be used as a verb, so you can pick that whole thing up.
Is that a state of being verb?
Mm-hmm. There's no action taking place. I would say it was a state of being. Let's try this one. The women selling apples at Market Square begin to spread rumors initiated by Van Rijwen's cook about Griet and Van Rijwen being the proposed subjects of Master Vermeer's newest painting. Where's your subject, Maritza?
Woman,
And how about the verb?
selling,
No, I don't buy that at all. What do you say, Jerry? Where's the verb?
Begin to spread.
Begin to spread. And what kind of a clause is that?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
So it's going to, we'll go back to selling in just a second, but it's women, and then it's begin to spread. Selling, Maritza, is a half verb. If you said the women selling apples at Market Square, period, you'd have a fragment. But if you said the women begin to spread rumors, and that's all you had, you'd be perfectly okay. So that's a half verb. This is your whole verb. Anybody else a question on that? Okay. Let's try 18. But the painting of the concert has already been started with Van Rijwen, his 17-year-old daughter, and his sister being portrayed as a trio of musical performers. You can see what happens here. The same people commission paintings. They're the only ones with money. So the same people sometimes have 10, 12 paintings by a particular artist in their home. Let's try this. Pippa, where's the subject?
Painting.
Where's a verb?
Has been started.
That's right. And what kind of a clause?
Main.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
So this is going to be painting, and then has been started. Okay, I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
Why wouldn't already be part of the verb?
Look up already and come up with an answer for me. Oh, let him look it up. He's got a dictionary right there. Now, while he's looking it up, I'm going to run it through the verb check. I already, you already, he already, we already, they already. That's my first problem. It doesn't hit that verb check. And what does it turn out to be?
Adverb?
Adverb. So mark it with ADV. Now, if you say, well, here's a split, the kind of thing Scott was talking about just a while ago, can you move things around? But the painting of the concert has been started already. I can move already around, can't I? And by the way, this would be a related question, Ben, to something you asked a minute ago. You said, gee, can you start a sentence with and? Well, can you start a sentence with but? Yes, for the same reason. They are coordinate connectives, we're going to find out, and they've been used to start sentences for the last 55 years, at least, probably a lot longer than that. Okay? Take a look at the painting of the concert, which is the one with Van Rijwen in it. Of course, you don't see Van Rijwen because Vermeer had him put his back to you. And evidently, Tracy Chevalier says he was a terrible musician. So they let him hold an instrument. They certainly didn't let him play it. Let's try 19. Vermeer is able to prevent Griet from being in that setting by promising Van Rijwen to paint her portrait for him as a separate commission. Scott, where's the subject in this?
Vermeer
How about the verb?
is.
What kind of a clause?
It's a main.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
And let's just stay on this for a minute and make a point. Vermeer and is. You see there, the same situation we ran into before. Able, we know, is not a verb, and we have a half verb here, but that means that to prevent Griet is going to be a verb phrase. Everybody see that? Mm-hmm. And to paint her portrait is going to be another verb phrase, not the main verb. Asking her to sit in a chair and look out of the window before turning to look at him, Vermeer makes his intention of painting Griet crystal clear to her. Kim, my subject.
Vermeer,
How about the verb?
makes,
And the kind of clause?
Main.
Kind of sentence?
Simple.
Okay. So it's Vermeer makes. So she's sitting in a chair, she's looking out of the window, and she knows he's going to want to paint her. On a cold day in January of 1666, Vermeer is ready to begin painting in earnest. Elbelin, where's the subject?
Vermeer
How about the verb?
is
More?
ready
More?
to begin.
To begin. More? You've got 80%. Where's the rest of that verb, Elbelin?
Earnest.
Well, that's not going to work. I earnest, you earnest, he earnest, we earnest, they earnest. It's going to be a modifier. Actually, it's going to be part of this prep phrase. Where is it, Kim?
Painting.
Painting. So this is an interesting verb. Let's go back, Elbelin. What kind of a clause are we looking at?
Main.
A main clause. And if that's the case, what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
A simple sentence. And so that verb, we're going to go back and look at it in a minute, is ready to begin painting, all of that. This would be a half verb. See that ing ending? Here's another half verb. Here's the state of being. Here's your helping verb. See how long these verbs can stretch out? And it changes from sentence to sentence. Greed is asked to come up to the studio to try out various poses and activities in order for the master to select the most suitable one. Jeff, my subject.
Greet
And how about the verb?
is asked
50%,
to come up.
too much.
To
If
come.
you gave me 2 words and I said 50%, I must be looking
Two
for
more words.
2 more.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of that verb?
To come.
Okay. And then I think you pick up that verb again a little bit later. There's another part of the verb you should be picking up. To come and
To try.
to try. What kind of a clause is this?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
So it's going to be, watch that helping verb is asked, right here, to come / to try. Is asked to come, is asked to try. You see what I'm saying? So that's a main clause. It's a simple sentence. Oh, now this is a good one. Will she be painted doing a maid's usual activities, such as hauling water from the canal, repairing worn clothing, cleaning and polishing window panes, or standing up and holding a mop in her hand? Now, Jerry, I want a verb. Actually, I only want a small part of a verb. I want a verb word.
Hauling. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's not the part I wanted, actually.
Sorry.
But that's not bad. That just doesn't work. Justin, where's the verb?
Will be painted.
Yeah, let's just take will and get a V above it. And then let me ask you, where's the subject?
She
That's right. Now, where's the rest of the verb?
be painted.
Okay. And maybe even a little bit more? A touch more verb?
Doing.
And I'll tell you why in a minute. What kind of a clause does that give us?
Main.
What kind of a sentence?
Simple.
So your subject is she, and the verb is will be painted doing. Doing is a half verb. In this sentence, painted is a half verb. You can have more than one half verb side by side, and when they're side by side, I'd include it as part of the main verb. Okay. Such as hauling water is going to turn out to be a prep phrase, an oddball prep phrase with a verb phrase acting as its object. It's not going to be a main verb. Now here's the thing, Jerry, I'm not done with you. That's a question, and that made it a little bit hard to see. Can you turn that question around for me? Now, you stumbled a bit ago. I'm expecting perfection. Here's all I want you to turn around. Will she be painted doing a maid's usual activities? That's all.
She will be painted doing a maid's usual activities.
Perfect. And that's all it takes, and then the verb parts go side by side where you expect them to be. Let's try this one. I will not paint you with a mop in your hand. Yvonne, the subject.
I.
Verb,
Will paint.
will paint. Type of clause
Main clause.
and type of sentence.
Simple sentence.
So I and will paint. Now you see this, Scott, in passing. Here we go. Is another quote. And the entire sentence is contained within the quote marks. Again, all of you notice that the end punctuation is inside the quote. That, of course, is Vermeer talking. So then she's finally asked to sit in a chair with her body turned in the direction of the window and her head facing him, with light from the sun falling on her face. Farah, where's my subject?
She
How about the verb?
is asked to sit.
Is asked to sit. And what kind of a clause is this?
Main clause.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
Simple sentence. So she and is asked to sit. She did a good job with not stumbling over finally. You remember that ly ending indicates that you're not looking at a verb but a verb modifier. And you certainly could say she is asked to sit in a chair finally, or finally she is asked to sit in a chair, and the verb parts go together just right. Gazing into Vermeer's soft gray eyes for long periods of time causes her to feel a ripple of heat passing through her body. Ben, the subject? No, you know what? I want to change my question. I want to give you an easier one. Where's the verb?
Gazing.
Now, that's what I was afraid you were going to say. Amy, where is the verb?
To feel.
Well, that's a half verb. I give you that. And to feel a ripple would turn out to be a verb phrase of some kind. Ben, got it?
Passing through.
Well, passing through her body is going to give us a verb phrase with another half verb kicking it off. Kim, where would you say the verb is?
Causes.
I would say causes. And now, my question, what causes her to feel a ripple of heat? The subject turns out to be what?
Time.
Time? No, time is part of a throwaway prepositional phrase of time. Jessica, listen to this carefully. What causes her to feel a ripple of heat? And you know what? It's a one-word answer.
I don't know.
Clue. 6-letter word, Justin. Where is the subject that goes with causes her to feel a ripple of heat? He's counting letters. Vince, where's that subject?
Eyes.
Ice doesn't have 6 letters in it. Pippa, where is it, Jerry?
Gazing.
Gazing. So gazing is the subject and causes is the verb. And what kind of a clause is that, Jerry?
It's a main.
What kind of a sentence is it?
Simple.
If you've always wondered, can a subject have an ing ending? There you go. When it does, it's called a gerund, but all you need to remember is that an ing word can act as a subject. Question, Scott.
Isn't this one of those particular cases where the prepositional phrase is acting as the object or the subject?
No. Which prepositional phrase are you thinking about?
Well, not the prepositional phrase, but a verb phrase, gazing into Vermeer's soft gray eyes.
No, I would
causes-
take this as a separate phrase, and I would take this as another separate prep phrase, and I would say gazing causes her to feel a ripple of heat. Period. Only gazing. That's not connected. That's not a present participle phrase if that's what you're thinking. That's a gerund, an ing word acting as the subject of the sentence. Like me saying, writing is fun. I deliberately made that short. Writing is fun. Where's your verb?
Well, is
Where's your subject?
writing.
What if I said, writing about my mother is fun,
Same circumstance.
but
Is
not
your
about my
verb.
mother, right? Because that's a prep phrase that I could easily eliminate from that sentence. Who else had a question? Anybody? You, Pippa?
Vince.
Vince.
How come eyes is not a subject?
Because eyes is the object of a throwaway prep phrase. See, you're just dying to be where we're going to be in the next lecture, which is going to be talking about prep phrases for the most part. Into Vermeer's soft gray eyes is a complete unit, and you can't pick part of it and let the rest of it out. If you use part of the phrase, you've got to take the whole thing. Okay, anybody else with a burning question? Let's try 27. Rejecting satins and furs as the type of clothing worn by a lady, Greet is persuaded to remove her white cap and to wrap a narrow band of blue cloth around her head, hiding her hair, but revealing the line of her cheek and one exposed earlobe. Jessica, where's the subject?
Greet.
And the verb.
Persuaded.
Say the whole verb for me.
What?
The whole verb.
Persuaded?
That's
Oh,
only
is persuaded.
is persuaded. Now I've got about 50%
To remove?
to remove. A little bit more,
To wrap?
and maybe to wrap. Is persuaded to remove, is persuaded to wrap. I wonder what kind of a clause that is,
Main?
and what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence?
So it's going to be greet, and then is persuaded to remove, / is persuaded to wrap. And that does form a main clause and a simple sentence. So again, she's wrapping this narrow band of blue cloth around her head and she's hiding her hair, but we're going to see the line of her cheek, and we're certainly going to see an exposed earlobe, and a misspelled word at that. That's her cheek. She doesn't have any checks. She has a cheek. Let's take a look at sentence 28. A yellow cloth with a blue border is then wrapped around the crown of her head, with its end coming apart quite by accident and hanging gracefully below her left shoulder. Farah, where's my subject?
Cloth.
Cloth. Where's the verb?
Is wrapped.
Is wrapped. And what kind of a clause do we get out of that?
Main clause.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple sentence.
So it's going to be cloth is wrapped. Now you see what's happening. Yellow cloth, we had a blue cloth a minute ago, and now this yellow cloth is wrapped around her head, and part of it comes apart and just hangs at her shoulder. The portrait of Greet is painted against a flat black background with no distracting elements such as a strand of pearls, a lady's face powder brush, or a pearl-encrusted jewelry box. Scott, where's your subject?
Portrait
And the verb?
is painted.
And the kind of clause?
Main?
Kind of sentence?
Simple.
So it's portrait is painted. And yet a spot of bright light, like that reflected in the pearl earrings worn by Vermeer's wife, is needed to catch the eye of the viewer. Maritza, where's the subject this time?
Earrings.
Earrings? No, I reject that.
Actually, in the that's a preposition of face. I know is needed to catch if my verb.
I'll take that. I'll get is needed to catch. That's right. So then you have to ask yourself a question based on that verb. What is needed to catch the eye of the viewer? And the answer is going to be a one-word answer.
Warm.
Where's it, Jerry?
Wife?
Wife?
That's
The
it.
wife is needed to catch the eye of the viewer? No, we don't care about that wife. Where's it going to be, Pippa?
Spot.
Spot. And what kind of a clause is that?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple.
So it's going to be spot. Way down here you have to go to pick up that verb, is needed to catch. I think you caught this, Maritza, in the pearl earrings is just going to be a throwaway prepositional phrase that we could toss out. Vince?
Can light be one of the subject also?
No, for the same reason that I rejected your last subject choice. Unfortunately, of bright light is part of a prep phrase. And ignore that. Well, that wouldn't change. Your subject is usually going to come toward the beginning of the sentence, and that is pretty much at the beginning of the sentence. But you couldn't say, of bright light is needed to catch the viewer's eye. But you could say, a spot is needed to catch the eye of the viewer. You see what I'm saying? Pippa, a question?
You need a T or SPO on subject. Thank you.
Good. It's like cheek instead of check. Exactly. Let's try this. Vermeer asks Greet to wet her lips and part them slightly and to make an arrangement to pierce her own ear. Can you imagine that? Getting your ears pierced professionally is bad. Getting them done by yourself must be just absolute torture. Jessica, where's the subject?
Vermeer.
And how about a verb? And a kind of clause?
Main.
The kind of sentence?
Simple sentence.
Okay, so it's Vermeer and it's asks. Now, we have another number of sentences to go before we finish this exercise completely, and clearly we won't get it done today, but I did want to say before we stop that I would like you to be sure to enhance your understanding of what we've been talking about today and go to the grammar website to do that. And I want to remind you that the URL for that website is grammar.deanzacollege.org. If you go to that website and you click on the links marked Exercise 3 and 4, they will double what we were doing today. Exercise 3 will have you find subject words, and Exercise 4 will have you find subjects and verbs with self-correcting answers. And then we'll go ahead and finish what we were working on today, and in our next session we'll do two things. We'll start a discussion of prepositions and prepositional phrases, and we'll launch the test on the simple sentence. So any remaining questions that you have on the simple sentence need to be asked at that time. Anybody with a burning question? Nobody? Everybody happy? You're getting this a lot better, don't you think? You're finding this. I mean, there are a few stumbles here and there, but some of these sentences are very tricky. Okay. All right, well then we'll continue this discussion in our next lecture. We'll stop right here. Okay. Yeah, you can talk. What is that question?